Hey everybody, it's Sam Bean from Iron and Wine. You're listening to the LSQ podcast. I had never played a concert until I got a record deal with Sub Pop, and they were like, "Well, you should consider going on tour." I was like, "Oh shit!" It's a very atypical story, and it also made me suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time. I just felt like I was wasn't supposed to be there. That I had fooled someone along the way and they were going to find out and the gig was going to be up.
Some 24 years later, the gig is nowhere near up for Sam Beam, who's been releasing beautiful music as Iron and Wine ever since his 2002 Sub Pop Records debut, The Creek Drank the Cradle, and his latest, his 8th studio album, Hen's Teeth, is another wonderful collection of music. It came out at the end of February, and we talk about the making of the album in episode 136 of the LSQ podcast. Hi, I'm Jenny LSQ, thanks for listening. And we also delve into his earlier creative history, and also a project he's working on for the future. A Broadway musical? Yeah, you'll hear more about that near the end of the interview. And he'll be playing some dates in Hawaii later this month and starting a full-scale North American tour at the end of April. And you can get tickets and further info over at ironandwine.com. Let's get into it. Hey, Sam, welcome to the LSQ podcast. Awesome to finally have you on the show.
Hey, Jenny. Great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
I want to dig right into talking about Hen's Teeth, the new album, and I understand it was recorded during, was it truly the same sessions as the previous one, as Lightverse?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we could have done like a double record thing, but those are terrible. So we decided to have mercy on people. We recorded for about a year, like a couple different sessions over the course of a year. And so the first batch for the first session, it was a kind of a normal batch, 10 songs or so. And then over the course of the year, I was able to finish other ones and with the band in mind and also, write some for I'm With Her. They were kind enough to sing with me because I knew we had some shows lined up to play with them. And I just thought it would be really fun to have some original material for us to sing.
So realizing at that point, before Lightverse was finished and before it was its own discrete collection of songs, that you had more than could fit on one album, but you don't want to do a Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, Iron and Wine stuff.
Right.
Like, how did you decide which songs go where? Was there a sort of aligning principle for what eventually became Hen's Teeth?
There wasn't, it's pretty intuitive. We did some songs with an orchestra, which was really cool. And so those ended up being on the first one, because they kind of sounded of a piece just naturally. Honestly, you just start somewhere and just start, see what would be interesting to put next. And then, try to do things that relate to one another or are different. A lot of the ones with the orchestra ended up being on the Lightverse record. I think because they were the more orchestrated ones, they were a little bit more ornate, a little more exploratory and just kind of fragile in nature. Whereas the ones that were left over, there was quite a few songs that I love Brazilian, like Tropicalia music. And so there's a couple that are like straight up sambas and things like that. And so they were a little bit more straightforward, a little more attitude, a little more gregarious.
With the time that passed in between Lightverse coming out and then getting back in there and, I don't know to what extent Hen's Teeth was finalized or mixed or mastered or that kind of thing. But in the lead up to starting to share, in your ocean and announcing this album and stuff like that, revisiting this group of songs that you had set aside a couple of years ago, did any of it feel different to you, or were there any songs that kind of rose to the surface in a way that you hadn't necessarily noticed them a couple of years back?
Yeah, sure. Honestly, I've gotten to a point where I like to record really quickly. I hire people who are quick improvisers and just are really expressive with their instruments in a way that's really exciting. And so what happens is I end up like in these sessions we were getting like one or at least 2 songs a day. In that way, I don't really get tired of them. You don't listen to them over and over again till you just want to cry. And so when I put them away for a couple months, you're surprised by a lot of things. It's almost like listening to a brand new record. There are a lot of little flourishes and things that the guys and the girls would do that were just really, I don't know, I just get a lot of joy out of listening to those songs now because they're so surprising sometimes. We just do them quickly and move on to the next thing instead of laboring everything. And, it's just a different process. I have a different relationship with my own music now. So it's good. I mean, I'm not saying I listen to it all the time because I like to keep moving to the next thing, but it is fun to revisit them.
It sounds like you're saying maybe that you didn't always approach it that way because
Yeah,
I feel like what I'm hearing is that you try there's a effort to not overthink it, which as I say that feels very like oxymoronic. I try not to overthink. That's what I do. I try not to overthink. And then I'm like, you're doing it. But so has it not always been that way for you with your music?
Yeah, definitely. I come from a fine arts background, like an art school kid, and so I grew up. I like to make things, and I like to develop things and polish things until they're ready to present and show. And with music, because you have to play them over and over again, you have to listen to them while you're mixing and stuff. It's you can easily lose whatever inspiration you started with. And so, yeah, over the years, I've just learned to hold on more loosely, enjoy sketching more so than the fine detail work. But I mean, it's not. I don't think they're like not detailed. It's just I like to include other people to create surprise for myself. That can do. There's lots of details, but I'm not the only one making them. I just kind of like. I feel like I'm just sort of in charge of the script. I just make the script, and then I bring in all the actors to play and make the scene.
Before we kind of go farther back into that creative history that you're beginning to talk about, I want to focus on one of my favorite songs from the album, Robin's Egg.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, there's so many great things about that tune, and listeners will have to find it on the album and experience it. Well, tell me a bit about just sort of how that song came together and sort of what it means to you.
Sure. It was one of the ones that I was mentioning that I wrote for I'm with her to sing with me. And it's just fun to have, I've fallen in love with duets, writing duets, because they're just so much more dramatically complicated than, a regular monologue type song, whatever you want to pontificate on, it's still a monologue. Whereas when you have like two people talking together, or four, which in this case, you can introduce subtext and things like that, different perspectives on the same happening, which is always fun. And so this is a pretty straightforward, there was some kind of falling out, but they have history together and they both see it very differently. And they also are looking back on how things played out and their sense of themselves, describing themselves and describing each other. And but also just doing it with like associative language. You became a robin's egg. You got loosey goosey, and you became a robin's egg. Which doesn't mean anything, but it still certainly has a connotation. Because I think robin's eggs are exotic and beautiful. Yeah, it's just about having fun. I just wanted to have something to sing with them that was really fun. That was fun to feel coming out of your mouth. It's really what most of the songs. There's definitely a lot of content as far as just ideas and things, but a lot of it is just finding words that I like to say, to be honest, just the sound of things, like a musical words express, the words that you're expressing have the same musical feeling as the instruments, or at least they should be complementary in my mind, not just because they say what you want them to say. They should feel like what you want it to feel like.
So going back to, as you alluded to prior to doing music, your fine arts background, but even just when you're a little kid, what were the first artistic things that you felt drawn to?
Oh, I did a lot of drawing, a lot of drawing. I was the kid, up in their room drawing all the time. Listening to records. I had a record player.
So what would you have been listening to? What would you have been listening to, and what kind of thing were you drawing?
Well, I also grew up in Star Wars land, so I was drawing, monsters and whatever.
Vader.
Yeah, exactly. Robots, stuff like that. Spaceships and swords. It depends on the year as far as what I was listening to. I mean, one of my favorites was like, you remember that Davy Crockett movie?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, I had a horse that I would ride around listening to that one. That was my favorite one. And then Cool and the Gang came out with Celebration, and my neighbor had that 7-inch, and we wore that one out. And then it was just all downhill from there.
What, so we're talking about like 7 years old or so, or around that age?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But I mean, so was it this, or you're like, okay, mimes, put the needle on the record, listening to Cool in the Gang or
Yeah,
whatever, and you're like, now you're at your little space wherever you draw, and
right.
that's where those activities, they kind of went together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever felt like they were having an exchange, but it was just, there was always music on. I just loved music. And then, then you discover the radio and it's just always on. Yeah, just one pleasure after the other. You're just going from one to the other. I don't know. I just like to be busy, just like making things. And
Right, but I mean, a lot of all kids draw basically, but for you, it sort of turned into something more. It became your thing.
yeah, I just suck at everything else. No, I just, I enjoy, yeah, they're just my favorite activities, just sort of smearing paint around. And now I see that the music is the same kind of activity, making these creative little expressions or things. They're all kind of of the same piece. They come at you different, but they're all come from a similar place.
And how old were you when you started pursuing, making art more seriously?
Yeah, like high school, middle school. I mean, it was something I always did. I think I wasn't necessarily pushed into it, but I was definitely provided a space to do it. It was like I went to a couple, art schools and summer schools and things like that. And when I was, with other art kids, I was with my peoples. It always felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. That was what was interesting. My folks were not creative types. They were like science people, but I was never made to feel like I shouldn't be doing it, which is usually the case. They're made to feel like it's superfluous and not worth your time. But I was never made to feel that way, for better or for worse, for them.
And that is, you went to college for art, yeah?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. VC, Virginia Commonwealth in Richmond.
And at that point, you hadn't started making music at all yet.
Nope.
But what was the music that when you were that age that we all are, when we really kind of start to form our identity around what we're listening to? What was the stuff for you?
Oh, I mean, for me, it was all, the alternative music, The Cure, New Order, like all that. R.E.M. was a big deal because I was, in the Southeast and they were sort of our neighborhood band, U2 was a big, all those bands. I didn't really discover 70s music until a little bit later. And I was always trying to get away from country music because it was so ever present where I grew up. But I figured that out later, how good that was. And also, my folks' favorite music was Motown, that kind of stuff, because they were, in college in the 60s, and that was just the best music. And so I always associate that. It's just that music is just pure, nostalgia and joy for me.
And were you singing at all, even though you weren't like making your own music? No,
No, not at all.
not a peep.
I had never played a concert until I got a record deal with Sub Pop, and they were like, "Well, you should consider going on tour." I was like, "Oh shit!" It's a very atypical story, and it also made me suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time. I just felt like I was wasn't supposed to be there, that I had fooled someone along the way, and they were going to find out, and the gig was going to be up.
So what sparked it all? What made you open your mouth and sing and start writing?
I mean, I would sing along with, whatever I was listening to in the car and stuff, but never, in front of people. And I was, obsessed with music, as we all were, in high school and college and stuff. It's just so important to me. And then I got a hold of a 4-track was the flipping point. And it went from just something that you engaged with to making something, that fit into like all the way I developed everything else in my life, like that I could sit with and develop the thing and think about it and change it and engage with it in that way. So when it became making something, when it became recording, I got obsessed.
Oh, the first handful of things that you worked on the 4-track, like, do you think in some elemental way they resemble what you ended up doing as Iron and Wine?
I guess I didn't really have the luxury of having a lot of options of like I could make this kind of thing or I was just doing what I knew how to do. I knew a couple cowboy chords and I knew that I loved Mazzy Star. and I loved country music and, you know, all these different kinds of, even like the punk rockers, you know, a lot of songs have two chords. And so you could do a lot of things with, you know, an acoustic guitar. And, you know, it was also by that time, you know, there was lots of people, there was a lot of road maps, whether it was like those Sebadoh, you know, acoustic, you know, 4-track things or, you know, even the early Palace Brothers stuff or the, I was obsessed with Cowboy Junkies, you know, like this sort of story sound, but it also had this sort of off kilter element to it. That's what I think that I heard and what I could do.
Yeah, I remember those early like Sebadoh cassettes that I feel like my older brother got me into it, or somebody at school like made him a copy of one of the tapes or something, and it was just like that definitely blew my mind. I was just like, what the hell is this guy doing? Why is it so cool?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was obsessed.
I don't know why I'm randomly thinking of that song, looking for a punch in the nose. I'm just looking for a punch in the nose.
You got a great memory.
But it's interesting because I feel like your sound is so singular out of those influences. It's like, okay, yeah, I can hear kind of what you mean a little bit about Cowboy Chords and Mazzy Star and stuff like that. But there's this, this thing you do that's sort of your signature sound that is more fragile and it's more detailed and it's more
Yeah,
poetic in a more deliberate way that doesn't quite sound like anything else, reminiscent a bit of, maybe there's a little bit of the Nick Drake thing in there for sure, but
yeah, yeah.
definitely singular.
You know,
Did you feel like even early on kind of found not to say a template, but a style and approach that felt just kind of instantly like the right thing, the right form?
well, I mean, I was definitely going for trying to find a sound, but it, you know, again, it wasn't like I was choosing from a bunch of options. You know what I mean? My voice kind of does what it does, and I learned pretty quickly that it's not moving. That I had to like shape what I'm doing around it because it's the one that's not going to change. I mean, there's definitely times that I wish it would do other things, but it's not going to. And I was always, you know, I was also into poetry and including the, you know, I like the word people's songs, you know, the Joni Mitchells and the Paul Simons, the Leonard Cohens of the world. You know, I love that music. So I was trying to just funnel all of that stuff together. Yeah, I was just kind of discovering the sound of my voice and what it liked to say, what I believed when I heard it say things, you know, because you can definitely sing songs and you're like, no, I'm sorry, no, it's not gonna. And so I was pushing those buttons with it, seeing what worked.
And this is how old are you at that point when you got the 4-track?
Early 20s, like probably like 20, 22, 23.
Did you find that it hit a different spot for you than doing visual art?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, it scratched. I mean, by that time, I was already studying filmmaking. And so it wasn't necessarily making little sonic movies, but it certainly scratched, you know, a storytelling itch the way that the visual art that I was working on did not. And just the sound of it was really fun. And it was also short. You know, I've also realized that I'm kind of hyper. And movies take a long time to develop, and they're prohibitively expensive. And so it was an activity that I could do and finish a song or two in a day,
Right.
you know. And it just felt like you would achieve something, and where things were moving along, you know, in an exciting way. Whereas the filmmaking took a lot more patience.
And, from what you said earlier about signing with Sub Pop and having to be like, oh shit, I guess I got to play shows now. And
Yeah,
it sounds like it's not like you didn't have some master plan and you weren't
no,
even necessarily trying to quote unquote get anywhere with this. It just, you sort of found your way to, and if I understand correctly, it was also sort of through a band of horses,
yeah, yeah,
Gridwell brother
that's right.
connection thing too, right?
That's right. Yeah, Ben and I grew up together in the same town. His older brother is one of my best buds. And so, yeah, we had lived together for a second in the '90s, and we're sharing music and just, you know, reconnected through music. And when he moved to Seattle, he had a band. They were talking to Sub Pop about signing with them, and he put my stuff in their ear, you know, to give my buddy Sam's music a listen. And they called me, and that was it. It's crazy. I mean, knowing what I know now, it's insane.
So, of course, in that situation, that's exciting, and
Super exciting.
one
Yeah,
one must go for it.
right. One must. One.
One, mu- but then you find yourself, you're making a record, then you're making the first Iron and Wine album, right?
Yeah.
Or did you have that
They,
first album?
yeah, it was just stuff I had recorded at the house. I had like, tons and tons of stuff, and they kind of picked the ones they wanted to put out. I mean, I definitely put my 2 cents in, but I was also, yeah, whatever you guys want to do is fine. Then when the second came around, yeah, it was time to like go in the studio and actually make a record.
Right. So, thinking about what we said at the top of the conversation too about the way that you like to make an album now, it sounds like it's kind of evolved into, maybe more of a hybrid of that.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, as things started, to develop over early on, I wanted to go and learn how, because a lot of musicians that I love so dearly, they make records very differently than what I was doing in my bedroom. And I wanted to learn how to do it. It became about how to make records that are studio creations. You know what I mean? Where the studio is like a creative partner or creative instrument, rather than just cowboy chords and 2 minutes worth of lyrics. But that learning process, yeah, again, like we were talking about earlier, meant churning on the same song, version after version for months. I bought a bunch of equipment and had a home studio, and that's what I did for like a couple of years, just sort of. And I enjoyed it, learning how to do it, and I enjoyed learning what to listen for in those kinds of records. But it certainly took a lot of the joy of interacting with the music afterwards away. And so now, yeah, I think I kind of split the diff.
Right. Because you'd ground it down to a nub of like doing it a million times, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And now I learned, for me personally, I'm not saying it's the only way to make records. That's just, it takes the fun out of it for me. So now I spend a lot of time on the script and then go in with people that are exciting to me, and we do things pretty quickly.
So the spending more time on the script, like, so how has that part of it evolved for you over the years? That just on your own, 1 minute there's no song, the next minute there's a song.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I take longer than I ever have. I just have a different relationship with it. I'm kind of just always working bits and pieces of songs here and there. I used to, just buckle down on a song all day until you were done. And I also have a lot of children, so I was also keeping kind of office hours out of necessity, because your time's not always your own when they're little, which, was beneficial, but not a natural thing for me. And so now it's, I kind of do it when I feel like it, which, is usually a little bit every day, honestly, because, there's a guitar laying around. I walk by and it says, hey, and I say, oh, hey.
And is it the kind of thing, or because you mentioned sort of ideas for words and phrases popping up here and there, but like, are how conjoined are the ideas for melodies and the ideas for phrases?
It depends on the song. I mean, they all start with a melody. I don't really sit and just write words to put into a song. So the words kind of come out of just sort of sitting around humming the same melody over and over. And sometimes something will pop out quickly. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you just start throwing things on and see what sticks. They're all a little different. There's no one way to do it. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes you get surprised and they come out fairly quickly. Not like a song will come out fully formed, but a phrase will appear, and then it's just a matter of supporting it with other stuff. Whereas sometimes it's literally like phonetically, just I have a syllable that I like. And what word does this sound like? I mean, it's just a ridiculous job. It's it's really fun though. Because there's no wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answers. You're just reaching around in the fog for something that's exciting for a second.
Can you think of an example of a syllable that you like? I mean, that's highly relatable to me, but
Not right this second, but when if I was like strumming on a guitar, I might want to, say ma or pop. But you never know. You never know. It depends on what kind of little melody you got going on.
Going back to the performance piece of it, you, as you said earlier, you were like, I got to play now because Sub Pop's like, you're going to go on tour.
Yeah.
How was that for you going from not being up on a stage that way to doing it? Was it terrifying, or did it sort of feel good immediately? Because I mean, I would say for folks who haven't seen
Yeah.
you perform, like you've got a natural sort of swagger up there. You seem pretty comfortable.
I've been doing it a long time now. But no, I was horrified, fucking terrified. Because I was always just sort of a behind the camera person. I have a hard time not analyzing what I'm doing at the same time as trying to do it. You know what I mean? Because I was always sort of directing, or this kind of energy. But and I was just scared of messing up and looking like a dumbass, really vain and stupid. But over the years, you end up just putting yourself in that situation and messing up in front of thousands of people for decades on end, and then you realize no one gets hurt at the end of the day, and it's all fine. And you start to learn the value of walking the tightrope and trying things because you're in that situation, and it's exciting. It was very valuable for me as a person and as an artist, definitely.
As you noted at the outset, when you finish an album, you're sort of thinking about what's going to happen next, or what do you?
Yeah.
Do you have stuff that you're thinking about already for what you're going to do next?
Yeah. Well, I'm really into collaborations lately, so I've been working on some stuff with Dawes and Maddie Cunningham. We'll see how that goes. Been working on a Broadway musical with my friend Lindsay Ferrantino.
Oh, go on.
Which is exciting. That's pretty different and fun for me.
Can you tell us any more about the concept or the theme or anything loose about the Broadway musical? That sounds amazing.
She grew up in Florida, near where there are a lot of orange groves, which have been changing a lot the way that they don't produce oranges the way they used to. There was disease, and then also the real estate market has kind of taken over that area. And so she's kind of thrust a bit of the Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard, this idea of like the changing of generations and things. So it's an American immigrant story because the Sicilians were the ones who came at the turn of the century, immigrated here, and then went down to Florida and developed the citrus because it was similar soil to what they had in Sicily, and they knew what to do with it. And so there was this, huge, bountiful time for them, but it also came with a lot of changes. And so it's a bit of that kind of a story, generational story. It has a lot of, because it's Florida, it has a lot of surreal, weird stuff that reminds me of a lot of like magical realism, South American magical realism elements. It's a big mixed bag, but it's American story. It's fun. And also with all the NASA rocket space shuttles and everything taking off right down the road, it's just a wild American story.
Wow, cool. I mean, writing in that format, writing songs that are woven into the story in that way, that's got to be super fun.
It's definitely fun. I realized like how much time I spend trying to figure out what the thing's about, and then not that, I'm not trying to write essays on a certain topic, but, as you get into a thing, you can go in a lot of different directions, and that's what you're trying to, you spend a while going out in this direction. You're like, oh no, I want to go down this direction. Whereas with the musical, they tell you what it's about. It's like, write this song.
Well, I'm sure I'm imagining that's sort of like that's in the slower lane of that's like a long-term project.
Yeah, they take a long time.
Please keep me posted.
Will do, Jane. I'm glad you're interested.
And I think that's a good place for us to wrap, Sam.
Great, yeah. Great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Great to talk to you too. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks again to Sam for chatting with me, and again, ironandwine.com to keep up with him, and jennylsq.com to find other episodes of the pod, and also, of course, on podcast platforms and on YouTube. And when you want to reach me, you can email me, lsqpod@gmail.com. Also on socials, including Instagram and Blue Sky and TikTok, I'm @JennyLSQ. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.